Hello and welcome back to another episode of MI for Change. I'm your host, Dr. Monica Gilbert. And today I want to start off with a bit of a little joke. I guess you can call it that. Let me ask all of you, how many therapists does it take to change a light bulb? Can anyone guess? Well, I won't know what you're guessing anyways, but I'll respond for you. So, the answer to this or the response to this is one, but that light bulb has to want to change. So, this is a typical psychological joke that we tend to hear sometimes. And what I will tell you today, and our topic today is on the transtheoretical model, is that you don't necessarily have to all of a sudden want to change in order to start making those steps towards change. A lot of the times I think that we think that awareness is the first step, and sometimes it is. Awareness is definitely important. However, you can still take some steps. You can still work with a client even if they haven't acknowledged 100% that the behavior that they're engaging in is harmful, or that the behavior that they're engaging in is not really causing them any good. So, we're going to go over the Transtheoretical Model of Change by Prochaska and DiClemente. And a way that you can see this in your therapeutic session is, I'm sure you've had examples of clients that come in and they are ready for change. They're like, where's the plan? I need help. Please help me. Let's do this. Others are like, well, I've thought about it, but I really don't have the time right now. I'm super busy. They're in this ambivalent stage. And others are like, I was recommended to this therapy, but I'm not really sure why I'm here. I don't have an issue. Or my child has been recommended to this, but honestly, he's just being a boy. He'll grow out of it. He's only been let go of like 5 schools. So let's talk a little bit about this transtheoretical model of change. Oftentimes, it is adopted into motivational interviewing because it works very well with the theoretical structure of communication. And think about a behavior that you want to change. And at the end of this, I'm going to ask you to reflect and respond to yourself in what phase of this change model you're in, because we all start in different phases of this trans-theoretical model of change. So there are 6 phases. The first phase is pre-contemplation. And in this phase, the person isn't really ready to move forward. They aren't ready to make the change. Again, in this phase, when people start pushing towards change, you're going to naturally push against change. Then we have our contemplation. So pre-contemplation, and second is contemplation. And contemplation is when you're like, well, yeah, maybe, nah, I really don't have time to deal with that right now. And then we have our preparation. And preparation is when we've decided to make this change, but we really don't have any action steps to move forward. Then we have action, which is the fourth phase of change. After that, we have maintenance, which is where we want to see our clients. And maintenance is actually when we can start fading out sessions because they're doing so well. They generalize these skills to other settings. The parent is engaging in these interventions everywhere across the board, and they're doing it consistently. And then we have this oh no phase, which is the relapse phase. And I'll tell you a little bit about what to do as a clinician in each of these phases, depending on what your client needs. So these are the 6 transtheoretical phases or stages that we all go through. Not only your clients, but we also go through them. So the first stage, let's bring it back to that pre-contemplation. I remember I worked with a client years ago when I was doing my doctoral practicum. And this client was used to drink vodka. That was his substance use, his preferred substance use. So he used to drink vodka, and it got to the point where his wife left him. He was getting late to work. He was about to get fired, and then a friend told him to come to these services. So when he first comes in, Of course, he's like, well, I was referred here, but I don't really think it's an issue. And I remember asking him, and I said, well, tell me a little bit more about, or describe to me. I led with an open-ended question. Describe to me how the, how it is when you're drinking vodka, or how much do you drink? And I remember him telling me, well, I drink about a cup of vodka a day. I don't see what the big deal is. And then when I asked him to describe what this cup looks like, he described like this huge pint of vodka. And I was like, okay, every day. I can see how that can cause some challenges, right? But the point is that he was in this pre-contemplative stage where even though he was seeing the consequences of his action, because he was seeing it, he wasn't in denial, he really didn't associated with this is my drinking, or even I can stop drinking and this can stop. It was kind of like, well, it just happened and here I am. So this person was in the pre-contemplative stage, right? He wasn't really seeing uh, what he was doing as like a real challenge. Some techniques that we can use in this phase, well, some techniques that we should stay away from is we don't want to push towards change. We don't want to say something like, well, maybe you should quit drinking because it's look at what it's gotten you, or something like that, right? Because again, this person is not ready to receive that. Or if we're working with a parent that says, well, I was court ordered to come here for behavior therapy, but I feel my child will grow out of it. This parent is not ready to hear about positive and negative reinforcement and all these interventions to use. They're just not ready. You're going to waste your time. You're going to get burnt out and nothing is going to come across, and you're actually going to push them away. So don't do that during this phase. So during the pre-contemplative stage, I see this as a stage where we want to just plant the seed. You want to open the door and just leave it open and just allow the magic to happen. Trust in the process. So some techniques that you can use are amplified reflection. We've spoken about reflections in the past, and this is a more complex reflection. Double-sided and amplified or complex reflections. So something that you can say is, and again, in amplified reflection, what we are doing is that we are emphasizing the extreme position implied by the speaker's statement. So we're doing this in hopes that they will meet us back in the middle. So let's say that you're working with a teacher in a school and the teacher says something along the lines of, those reports really aren't that convincing, or that data really doesn't prove anything. So you would respond with, it sounds like you don't feel that any report or any data is accurate or useful to you at all. When you say that at all is when you're pulling them to that extreme. And what you're hoping for is for them to respond with, well, I wouldn't say at all. I'm sure that some of the data can be valuable or we can use. Okay, so we want to bring them back to the middle. Also, rolling with resistance. So, what we're doing here is that we're acknowledging the challenge or the pessimistic perspective. And instead of arguing for change, we are rolling with it. We are going with it. So let's say that the speaker mentions, well, I doubt this new approach will help us at all. You can respond by saying, so it feels pretty pointless to even make an effort to start. So again, you're rolling with them. I remember I was working with a client and I said something along those lines. I said something like, yeah, it feels like, why even come to therapy? Like everyone's pushing you to come to this. It's not like this is like a miracle worker. And he was like, right, you totally get me. Yes, yes, that's what I'm saying. And then we continued to work on other things. So it's not like you want to stay there, but perhaps in these initial stages, when you are in the pre-contemplation, you want to roll with that resistance. And again, sometimes people come to therapy for the first time and you're their first therapist and that's it. They have no other history. Other times they've been to therapy before, so they've heard it already. You don't want to be that person. You don't want to be that therapist that's telling them the same thing that everyone else is telling them. Querying extremes is another technique that you can use when someone is in this phase. And when you're querying extremes, you're going to ask about the best and the worst case scenario. So if things keep going the way they are with Timmy's behaviors, what do you see happen 5 years from now? How about the flip side? How about if things change? What can happen if he is not engaging in these behaviors 5 years from now? What are some doors that can be open or some things that he can start engaging in or doing? So those are just some techniques you can use here. Just remember, pre-contemplation, all you're doing is planting that seed. And I know a lot of us in this rush culture, we have the question of, well, how long is it going to take? And my answer to you is as long as it takes. Your client will dictate how it's going and when they're ready. And you'll know when it's time to move them to the other phase. And by the way, all of these techniques you're using in the pre-contemplation, the goal is to move them towards change, but you want to do it slightly. You will know if you're pushing too hard because you'll start hearing a lot of sustained talk, and that shows you that you are pushing too hard. Okay, so the next phase is the contemplation phase. So this is when you're like, yeah, I think this is a problem. I think drinking a bottle of whiskey every day can be an issue, but I don't really know how to cope with with my life without having to drink, or I know that this behavior my child is engaging in is such a bad behavior, but I really don't have time. I have to make money. I have to go to work. I have to do all these things. So this is a contemplative stage. So we are in the middle. We want to, we don't want to at the same time. One technique that you can use here is, again, this is complex reflection, but this time we're going to use the double-sided reflection. So when we're using the double-sided reflection, we are acknowledging both the reservation and also the experience. So we are acknowledging that there is a challenge, and we always want to end it with, well, but there is this hope, in other words, or this is your goal. This is what you want to work on. And whatever that end statement is, you want it to be pushed. You want to push the client towards that change. Something important when using double-sided reflections is that you want to use and not but. Usually when we use but, we're discounting what was already said. For example, that car is red, but it's nice. That car is red and is nice. You see the difference one word can make? So an example of a double-sided reflection is, let's say the speaker says something like, I'm not convinced this new strategy will make things more efficient, and besides, nothing we've tried so far has worked. You can say something like, well, I can see you're in a tough spot. On one hand, you are skeptical that this strategy is going to work. On the other hand, you've tried so many things already and nothing has worked. You really want to find something that does work. So right here, we're highlighting both parts of that statement. And remember to use the and. And what we want is to tilt the scale. So now the client will respond with, yeah, I want to find something that really works. Like, what is going to work at this moment? And then that's when you can start the collaboration process. Reframing is another type of skill that you can use when someone is in this contemplative stage. And reframing is turning discouraging or negative comments into more positive ones. For example, the speaker may say something like, I've tried so many solutions to manage my workload, but none of them seem to help. And you would say something like, it sounds like you're really persistent in experimenting with different ways to stay on top of things, even when you haven't seen much improvement yet. Okay. So again, we're kind of rolling with what they're saying, but we're reframing it. We're using an affirmation even. We're saying that they're really persistent. Agreeing with the twist is one of my favorite ones. And here's exactly what it sounds like. So we are validating what they're saying and their independence while inviting them to see the other side of things. So let's say the speaker says something like, I know how to handle my team. No one needs to tell me how to do my job. You would respond with saying something like, you've got a strong sense of what works for your team, and it's completely up to you how things get done. If we're going to collaborate effectively, having you take the lead in this process is essential. The same way that if you're working with a parent and they're saying, well, I know what to do with my child. I've been through these therapy sessions so many times and it's always the same thing, but I'm the parent. I know what to do. I would say something like, absolutely, you are the key player in all of this. Without you, we cannot do any of this. Okay. So we are agreeing with a twist. Our next phase of change is the preparation phase. So we already did the pre-contemplation, contemplation, and now we're in the preparation. So in the preparation, this is when the person decides that they want to make a change. They see the value in making the change and they begin planning steps. So they're ready, and this is when they need specific intervention. So this is when we can start taking out our therapeutic tools and start working on the graphs and on the actual interventions, on identifying the functions of the child's behavior, and on all those things. During this phase, you want to make sure that you are clarifying the goals, that you're offering a menu of options, and that you are exploring expectations. Then we get into the action phase, and this is when they're actually engaging in that behavior. So if it's a client that has substance use, they have stopped the substance use and they're engaging in the replacement behaviors. If it's a client that's cutting, they have stopped cutting. If it's a parent that needs to intervene a certain way, they have started intervening that certain way. So the behaviors are not yet stable or generalized, but they are actively working on it. And this is the actual first step towards change in this action phase. What does the client need? Well, the client needs encouragement. They need affirmations. They need reinforcement. And especially if they are facing roadblocks or if they are facing stressors that come up. The next phase is the maintenance phase. And again, this is our happy phase as therapists. We want to see clients here because this is when we're like, yes, they're doing it on their own without us, and it's maintaining. We see it maintaining for months, and we can actually fade out. We can fade ourselves out. We can fade out the prompts. We can decrease the hours, do all that good stuff that we love to do so we can start helping others. And usually here, the client has already established new behaviors long term. Now, it's important that you go over a relapse prevention because just because these behaviors are maintained doesn't mean that they're not going to encounter stressors, that they're not going to encounter things that naturally happen. People lose their jobs, pandemics happen, divorces, deaths. So many things can happen that will throw this client off track. And it's impossible for you to take a look at all these things and plan for them, of course, but you want to establish some sort of relapse prevention. For example, I was working with a client who was having his mom, so it was a dad, and he was working with his son on some interventions. And he was telling me that during Christmas, his whole family from Chile comes to visit. And this is not for all South American countries, but a lot of them, we have abuelitas that tend to give in to all these behaviors that we've already worked on so hard. So he was telling me that he was anticipating this difficulty, that the mom was going to come and she was just going to do whatever she wanted. She was going to reinforce the heck out of all these tantrums and behaviors. And we actually came up with a relapse prevention. So this is what we have to do. Perhaps include his mom in the training session. Let's plan for this. What happens if this happens? And luckily it didn't happen, which is great, but at least we had that plan already in action. You want to develop some sort of like an escape plan. Then we have what we all fear, which is relapse phase. And relapse is a natural, very natural part of the change cycle. So relapse is when a person engages in that bootleg reinforcement, or they start drinking again, or they stop studying, or they just have a relapse. Now, the important thing is if the client is telling you, if the parent or the client is telling you that they've had a relapse, see this as a positive thing because they have enough trust to be vulnerable and tell you that they messed up. If they don't have that trust in you, they won't tell you. They'll hide it, they'll lie. That's how you know if you have really good rapport with that client, if they are able to be sincere and honest with you during this time. So if they tell you this, first see it as a good thing that they're coming to you with this information. And then next, you want to establish that this was a U-turn and not the end of the road. So go back to what can we learn from this relapse? What can we learn for the future? And develop other replacement strategies and also maintain your support. Maintain your support during this time. No one likes to say, oh my gosh, I gave in. Oh my gosh, I didn't do this right. Well, most people, I don't think, like to say that. So it's important that you meet them back where they're at. And it's not to say that you're going to gloss over it and do this, what is it called? Like positive and the positive toxicity, right? Where you're like, oh, but everything's okay. Let's go. Everything is not okay. This sucks. But just maintain that you're there with them. Okay, so yeah, that was unfortunate. I understand that you feel like now you have to go to step one. Let's see what can you learn from this challenge? Then how can we prevent it in the future? And how can we re-enter the change cycle? It's all about re-entering the change cycle. And just a little bit of a summary for these trans theoretical like phases of change. It's not necessarily that a client is going to start in the pre-contemplation and then go through all of the different phases. We would hope that things are linear and beautiful like that, but life is chaotic and that doesn't happen. So sometimes clients starts in the preparation, then they go back to the relapse, and they go to the pre-contemplation, and they just jump all over the place. Now, why is it important for us as clinicians to know what phase of change the client is in? Again, because we are going to use interventions based on the phases. If you identify that this client is in the pre-contemplation, now you know based on this podcast, based on this episode, what intervention you should use with them or how you should be communicating with them. So this allows us to kind of gauge where they are, identify what phase they're in, and then use interventions that are going to help in moving them towards change, which is what we hope which is what we hope to do. I hope you guys found value in this, and I hope that you can take a little piece with you during your sessions. Please comment, please share, and let me know how it goes. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of MI for Change. If you're ready to keep growing your motivational interviewing skills, I'd love to invite you to explore my MI Academy, where you'll find a full library of on-demand courses designed to help you put MI into practice with confidence. You can learn more at www.drmonicagilbert.com. Until next time, keep asking the questions that spark change.